Thank you for tuning in and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I will be going over the three main tanking archetypes, what makes each one unique, and how I propose to fix some of the major downsides of a certain type of tank. Hint, it's shields. Before diving into this video, I do want to say I appreciate everyone leaving their feedback in the comments of the last video about the slam build nerfs. Understandably so, losing power from your build always feels bad, but don't lose faith just yet. Care will be released soon, and moving into the raid, we will see how the meta and balance shakes itself out in the end. After speaking to many tanks of each major archetype, I feel I've gathered a general consensus of how others feel about their build and spec. The biggest problem facing all tanks right now is threat. Many players who want to DPS have yet to update their mentality when approaching the content ahead. Yes, more threat means more damage output, which means faster kill times. I get that. If someone who hasn't been a tank for a long time like I have may not have considered that as a tank, if we're taking more and more threat generating talents and spells to combat the ever increasing power of players, we are sacrificing our survivability to do that. Ultimately, during a raid or hard boss encounter, your DPS is irrelevant if your tank gets evaporated because you have not considered the other side of this scenario. Let's start out by talking about bear tanks. Right now, I feel they are the most overall well-rounded tank. They have decent threat generation, both AoE and single target. They have the largest HP pools and have the highest raw physical mitigation of any tank right now. Larger HP pools allow bear tanks to withstand high amounts of burst from many monsters hitting them all at once, or when there are large amounts of casters hitting you with spells. Their insane physical mitigation comes from the fact that they have the highest armor scaling due to talents, being able to use both a two-hander with Titan's Grip and using shields. I would imagine by the end of Care, you can expect druids to be at the 75% physical mitigation cap before cooldowns. The spell that really puts druids ahead of the pack on physical mitigation is Savage Defense. Given a rough estimated value of 2,500 attack power, which is easily obtainable given raid buffs and proper gearing, you are getting a flat 625 damage reduction on the next physical hit received. The reason this is so effective, if you have anything that reduces the base damage being received from a hit or spell, any percentage modifiers will reduce the new value by a greater percentage overall, netting you higher levels of mitigation than before. This type of tank does not have access to many active cooldowns, so when shit really hits the fan, you might not have the tools available to survive. If you like passive tanks, then this is the tank for you. Next is two-handed Parry Tanks. In TBC, they introduced the stagger tank mechanic and really pushed support for a two-handed tank, a lot like DK tanking from Wrath of the Lich King. This build primarily focuses on pure physical damage avoidance through parry and a lesser extent dodge. They have a decent HP pool, about on par with shield tanks when properly geared, and have great single target threat generation. The loss of a shield is far outweighed by having the new stagger mechanic. The reason this combined with pure avoidance is so powerful is because you're getting hit far less than other tanks right now, and even when you do, the damage is far less spiky due to it being averaged out over the stagger duration. It's a smoother influx of damage, and the chance of being bursted is far less than any other tank currently. The talent called Deflection in Arms Warrior allows parry chance to be applied to spell damage at 100% of its value, allowing a lot less damage taken from spells as well. I find parry tanks to be an engaging playstyle due to using more buttons than just swipe and lacerate, and monitoring self-buff like Ghostly Strike keeps you on your toes in the middle of a fight. This tank does have a few cooldowns you can cycle through, but not nearly as much as the shield-based tanks. This build has high levels of customization, and if you like a few extra buttons to press, this is the tank for you. The last major archetype is the traditional sword and board tank. This type of tank I currently feel is the weakest of the three major archetypes, but given dire situation, their immense amount of cooldowns can save you from dying over other tanks. The two major ways of building this tank is more of a warrior based using thunderclaps, revenges, and devastates using holy based abilities on cooldown for extra threat generation. Parry Tanks are by far the most popular at the moment due to holy damage threat scaling being the highest. This build focuses more on Hammer of the Righteous, Holy Wrath, Seals, and Consecrations to hold threat and can utilize spell power scaling through talents and enchants. From tanking over 100 heroics at this point, being nearly best in slot geared for my tank style, I feel I have at least a decent idea of what's hurting shield tanks the most. The fact you are sacrificing many survivability-based talents and spells in favor of threat leads to overall less HP and mitigation. As a shield tank, you try and focus on getting your block value up as high as possible to block the most amount of damage per swing, but this doesn't save you from spells. Due to having less HP because of threat balancing problems right now, you can very easily get bursted from a few rogue spells and 2 or 3 melee mobs hitting you all at once. For argument's sake, in Underbog Heroic right now, there is an instant cast ability called Tentacle Lash from the Spore Bats that can hit me in my tank gear for 7.2k damage before block value is equated. No amount of block value will save you from this when you get hit by 4 of them all at once. To summarize before getting into my proposed solutions for this tanking archetype, what are the biggest problems? Shield tanks can't survive heavy amounts of burst without cooldowns, and fall apart when not being able to block due to CC, knockdown, fear, or disorient effects. Solution 1 and Solution 2 are 2 new REs that I have crafted myself for you guys to look at and see if you agree with as well. The first one, Epic RE, is going to be Militant. Allows the ability to block while stunned, feared, or silenced at 50% of your block chance. Running heroics in their current state, there is a lot of fears, stuns, and silence effects, and I can tell you from personal experience that as soon as I'm not able to block incoming attacks, the amount of damage jumps dramatically. If I don't have a very strong healer or a cooldown running as I get CC'd, my survivability plummets. This would help bridge that gap between being CC'd and when you're not, without entirely circumventing mechanics that are meant to be deadly. The second new RE I propose is a new legendary RE, Will to Live. When you are below 60% HP, you gain a 5% chance to block all forms of damage. When you are below 40% HP, you gain a 10% chance to block all forms of damage. When you are below 20% HP, you gain a 15% chance to block all forms of damage, and gain a 50% increase to block value. I feel this might be a very simple solution to combat large amounts of spike damage currently in the game. If at different HP values your chance to block increases, this can give your healers just enough time to get you back up before the next large amount of burst damage hits you. This effect could have a cooldown associated with it if the effect is too strong as a static ability, but the values I gave I feel are conservative enough. The third solution is actually a capstone bonus for the shield's specialization in the Prot Warrior. This would be a really good thematic choice because you could turn on your tank identity at a very early level, and I feel it would just be the perfect fit considering you are a shield tank after all. The capstone bonus reads as follows: for every blocked attack, you gain a damage shield equal to 25% of the damage blocked. This effect can stack up to 5 times. You lose a stack for every non-blocked hit you take. The numbers of this could be adjusted, I'm just throwing out my ideas, but the logic behind the numbers I chose is based on the values that I see while I'm tanking currently. With cooldowns active, I am blocking an average of 1300 damage per hit and around 550 without cooldowns. Assuming a 60% block chance in any given scenario, you could expect to gain up to 2 to 3 stacks on average before taking a non-blocked hit. Without cooldowns, 3 stacks would give you a shield of 412.5 damage, and at 5 stacks giving you a shield of 687.5 damage. With cooldowns, 3 stacks would give you a shield of 975 damage, and at 5 stacks it would give you a shield of 1625 damage. This would heavily incentivize shield tanks to be fully committed to maximizing block value and block chance, differentiating the archetype even further from other tanks. With all that being said, what do you all think about the current state of tanking? Do you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts so far? If you have any feedback, please go ahead and leave a comment below. I would love to hear what you all have to say about this subject. I will leave a link down in the description below to my Twitch page where you can see me live testing out new builds and farming heroics. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for tuning in. Bye bye.